The first feature today is going to be from Jessica Stubbs, who's an intern in the Predator-Prey program. Jessica comes to us from University of Cal Berkeley, where she has her Bachelor's of Science degree. For a newly minted Bachelor of undergraduate, Jessica has quite an impressive list of research experience as an undergrad, having worked in French Polynesia and in Madagascar, and a couple of research labs at Cal. After her internship is done here at Archbold, she's off to begin pursuit of her master's degree at the Nicholas School for the Environment in environmental management. And today she's going to be talking about her independent research project looking at mesopredator responses, behavioral responses to fire on Buck Island Ranch. We're going to be sad to see Jessica go, but we're looking forward to kind of following her career as she goes forward. The sky is really the limit. She's been a wonderful presence for us in the Predator-Prey program, and I know we'll miss her. So with that, take it away, Camera Trap Queen.
Wow, thank you, Joe, for that very generous introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Stubbs, and my independent project is Preying with Fire, the differential response dynamics of mesopredators on a pyric-mediated cattle ranch. In 1 second. Here we go. So the site of my study is Buck Island Ranch. It is a 10,500 acre operational cattle ranch nestled in the headwaters of the Everglades. It's comprised of both semi-native and improved pasture, and it has many attributes that have historically characterized this environment as a pyric landscape, such as its pervasive lightning strike regime and a long dry season. As such, prescribed burning is a indispensable management application on the ranch ecosystem. They burn at a 3 to 5 year interval, and unlike the station, they exclusively burn during the dry season, and they burn for the specific imperative of producing fresh and palatable pasture for its cattle herd. So both fires and predators have strong influences on habitat structure, prey dynamics, and populations. However, it's largely unknown how fire and mesopredator guild interacts, especially in working landscapes. So what exactly is a mesopredator? They are mid-ranking mammals that usually occupy one position lower compared to apex predators in a food. So on Buck Island Ranch, they are coyotes, possums, bobcats, raccoons, skunks, and river otters. And in working landscapes, mesopredators are specifically important when larger apex carnivores, such as panthers or black bears, are excluded from these human-modified landscapes. So as such, mesopredators become the most dominant carnivores, and they exert a lot of top-down influence on the rest of the ecosystem. So for my specific study, I analyzed the 4 most abundant mesopredators, which are coyotes, bobcats, raccoons, and possums. So these are all habitat generalists, and they are found ubiquitously across North America. However, they do share divergent sets of specific traits. So my large-bodied mesopredators are bobcats and coyotes, and they exploit a much greater spatial scale. So their home ranges are about 10 to 20 times the size as small-bodied mesopredators. They can also exploit larger prey items, such as white-tailed deer and wild pigs, and they employ vegetation in their hunting strategies. The small-bodied mesopredators have much more restricted home ranges, and they oftentimes exploit more opportunistic or smaller prey items. And although they don't use vegetation for hunting, they do use it for cover and shelter. So now that my key players are introduced, looking at literature, we know that the primary mechanism through which fires impact predator behavior is via changes in vegetation structure. So this induces alterations in shelter, exposure, risk, and prey availability. And as such, this impacts mesopredator behavior, distribution, and abundance. but how specifically mesopredators respond to pyric events is largely unknown, especially on working landscapes. So now I have my mesopredator guild, and I have an exceptional study site at Buck Island. My question is, how do prescribed burns impact mesopredator activity on a central Florida ranch? And because predators respond both spatially and temporally to fires, I investigated this through two specific means: detection frequency and deal activity patterns. So this is the Buck Island Ranch Camera Monitoring Network. It was initiated in 2015 by Raul Boughton as part of a USDA APHIS fatal swine management project. I studied this over a 3-year period from 2016, 17, and 18. And over this time period, I have 20 impact cameras and 20 control cameras. The impact cameras were located within and facing a pasture that experienced a prescribed fire, and my control cameras were located in pastures that did not experience any fire events over that same 3-year period. So all the prescribed burns occurred within a 4-month period, all in the dry season. And I decided to investigate time since fire because looking at literature, mesopredators specifically are most sensitive to the pyric metric of time since fire compared to other metrics like fire return or biodiversity. Additionally, I targeted a 12-week window as it allowed me to aggregate data over 3 years while reducing the variable of seasonality. Additionally, around 6 weeks after burn, that pasture is regrown and the cattle return to the normative schedule of grazing. So keeping it within this 4-month period and this 12-week time frame allowed me to aggregate a lot of camera data while reducing co-occurring variables. So let's dive into detection frequency for my focal species. So here on the y-axis, we have the number of detections in my 4 focal species. Because my data was not normal, I applied non-parametric paired t-tests to analyze detection frequency. And as you can see, the larger bodied mesopredators exhibited a significant decrease in detections post-burn compared to the smaller bodied mesopredators that exhibited no significant decrease. If we look at my control cameras over the same 12-week period, they exhibited no significant decrease in the pre-burn and post-burn events. Looking a little finer scale on the x-axis, the y is the same number of detections, but now it is split up into 6 weeks pre-burn and post-burn event. And this allows you to a little more acutely see how bobcats and coyotes decreased post-burn event, while the smaller mesopredators maintained a pretty normative detection frequency. In my control sites, the x-axis still refers to days before and after fire. This is just referring to the parallel temporal scale on which I compared my impact in my control cameras. So although these did not experience a burn, it's on the same time scale as my impact cameras. And as you can see, there's no significant impact after in that 6-week period. So if we look a little closer at the 2 large-bodied mesopredators that experienced a decrease in detections, on the y-axis, we have the mean daily detection frequency. And on the x, we have my pre-burn and my post-burn periods. The black boxes are my impact cameras, and the circles are my control cameras. As you can see here, for both bobcats and coyotes, they decreased significantly in pastures that experienced a burn event, and they did not in pastures that did not experience any burn event. So now exploring my deal activity patterns. Deal activity refers to the cycle of behavior over a 24-hour period for a species. So here on the y-axis, we have the average detection frequency, and on the x, we have the hours of the day. And these curves represent the line of best fit for the daily cycle of behavior for these mesopredators. And my data was also not normal here, so I applied non-parametric paired KST tests to analyze this data. And as expected from earlier results, there was a significant decrease in the average detection frequency over that 24-hour period. However, there was no shift in the times of most active period or the least active period. So they remained mostly crepuscular. They did not shift along this x-axis. looking at these small-bodied mesopredators, there was no significant decrease in the average detection frequency in total. However, they did exhibit a shift in the 24-hour period of the day for when they were least and most active. So as you can see here, their least active time of the day shifts more towards the afternoon in the lighter periods. In their most active points of the day, shift a little darker, which shows a slight shift towards greater nocturnality. So to summarize my significant finding, the large-bodied mesopredators exhibited a decrease post-burn in both total and average detection frequency. However, they did not exhibit any deal change over a 24-hour period post-burn event. This is in direct contrast to the small-bodied mesopredators, which did not change in detection frequency post-burn event. However, they did exhibit a shift towards greater nocturnality post-burn event. So to summarize some factors that may be inducing these differential responses, large-bodied mesopredators have much more extensive home ranges. So when a pasture is burned in their territory, they can afford to spatially avoid these areas. And as such, they tend to occupy and seek out areas of the habitat that have not been disturbed by a fire event. This reflects high spatial plasticity, as when a fire occurs in their area, they can afford to move elsewhere in their larger home range instead of trying to cope and tolerate a stressed environment. And this is consistent with my results showing a total decrease in detection frequency, but no shift over that 24-hour time frame. The smaller-bodied mesopredators, however, have much more restricted home ranges. Remember, they're 10 to 20 times smaller than the large-bodied mesopredators. And so they cannot afford to spatially avoid a pasture when it's burned in their small territories. However, they can afford to shift when they're most and least active during the day to cope or tolerate in these stressed environments. So this reflects high temporal plasticity, as although they cannot avoid the burned areas, they can shift how they respond to them. And this is also helpful in contextualizing my results, as we did not see a total increase or decrease in frequency after burn event, but we did see an activity shift in those burn areas. So both these temporal and spatial responses provide interesting insights into how the mesopredator guild fits into the working landscape metrics, and it helps us a little bit more comprehensively understand how mediating these environments with fire impacts really influential carnivores and omnivores. So the Buck Island Ranch Monitoring Network provides a really excellent opportunity for future predator-fire relationship studies. I suggest that future studies accept or adopt a before-after impact control study design, similar to mine, but over a longer period of time. So perhaps multiple fire intervals. I also would suggest that they record and they embed within the study design more dimensional fire metrics, such as fire age, patchiness, severity, and fire return interval, because all of these pyric metrics can provide more intricate insights into how predators respond to these fire events. Additionally, it's very difficult to delineate specific patterns of predator behavior after burn events because of the immensity and the multitude of co-occurring variables. So seasonality, multiple species, sites, habitats make it really hard to specifically elucidate trends that occur after a burn event. Additionally, as we all know, prescribed burns are not the only disturbance regime on Buck Island Ranch. So cattle grazing, aerating, mowing, overseeding, fertilizing, these are all management mechanisms that can impact how a predator responds to a fire event. And so I hope future studies can possibly embed these considerations into further exploring this really imperative relationship. So I want to thank, first and foremost, the Predator Prey Lab. It's been a real honor to work under the leadership of Joe and Finn. Also with the data expertise of Matt and Angela, and also Zach for helping me throughout my project and for uplifting the entire Archbold community. Thank you to Raul, Chef, Vivian, and Ali for helping me throughout this project and providing me really great feedback and wisdom. Again, to Buck Island Ranch and the USDA for allowing me to operationalize this really awesome camera network for my study. And lastly, to my fellow interns and RAs, shout out, you've made my move from California to Whittle, Florida, very much worth it. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, open it up for questions for Jess. Okay, I'll hand it over to Sahas.
Thank you, Jess. That was a great talk. So what do you think the possums and the raccoons that are shifting their deal cycles later, are they eating something different, or are they able to use darkness to creep up on stuff? Or
questions. Could be a few different reasons, maybe prey availability being altered, but what we found in literature is that they shift towards darker periods of the day because they don't have the protection and the cover of a vegetation network. So instead they're using the cover of night to avoid different prey or competitors in that newly threatened area.
Cool. Thank you.
Hey, Jess, great job. I just wanted to ask if there were any sites in Buck Island Ranch that might have artificial light that mediated that effect that you were seeing with the shift in that pattern.
Sorry, an artificial what?
Artificial light. Like, is there?
Oh, that would be really interesting as well. So as we know, from past intern studies, mesopredators tend to avoid human dense areas such as near buildings or other habitations, but that would be really interesting in the future to see if light affects how maybe the smaller mesopredators shift their deal activity. Great question.
Great job. I'm wondering if the bobcats and the coyotes are just sticking to the vegetated areas around these burns, or if there's any way for you to know that. So do you have a camera network in the adjacent areas that are not burned? And is there a way for you to track if it's just that they're going there, or are they abandoning the whole ranch? Or I guess I'm wondering where they're going.
I'm also wondering that. But you do bring up a great point. Mesopredators, because they're so adaptive and versatile, oftentimes find ways to exploit a burn event. So stay in that fringe habitat right before the burn, and maybe scavenge or find other interesting opportunities to utilize that to their advantage. Because this camera trap network was set up for feral swine and not a specific fire study, it doesn't incorporate the entire aspect of fire response dynamics like that, because I would be really interested where are they going, if they're leaving Buck Island Ranch, if they're using undisturbed habitat somewhere else. I would like to know that. But yeah, great question.
We have a question submitted online from Josh Daskin. Excellent presentation. Question is, do your statistical models take into account any changing detectability before versus after fire? The smaller species, could the apparent lack of change in detections be affected by increased detectability with less vegetation in the way of cameras? So in the way of cameras, I guess we mean by less vegetation blocking the cameras.
I see. Yeah, it's a great question. Detectability is always an important factor in camera networks. So at least every 2 months, we go out and we service these camera traps, and that includes pretty extensive weed whacking to ensure that vegetation does not obscure or cause any false positives. Additionally, when we filter out our data set, we make sure to filter out any false positives, any detections where it's just moving. So this is all accounted for while in the process of cleaning up our data set. But detectability is a great question. As our cameras can detect about 10 to maybe 19 feet deep, it could also be a factor. Maybe in the pre-burn events, we're not capturing some of the animals that are further away from the cameras, and that would be really interesting to know as well. So, great question.
Another one from online, and then we'll come back to you, Sahas. So Sean from the chat asks, since larger predators have a larger home range, they might be able to shift, which I think you covered in your comments. Do you observe other areas that are not burned having a higher frequency of activity of the larger bodied predators?
That's a great question. I had the same question. And in those control sites that were not burned, we did not see any increase in activity from the large bodied mesopredators. So this suggests that maybe there are areas of the territory that are beyond Buck Island Ranch as well, because they didn't immediately flock to the controlled sites during that same period. So if we had maybe a more extensive network, it would probably be easier to see spatially where they're going after burn.
Right. There you go.
That's, you may have said, but I've forgotten how many cameras for control and in the burn sites.
Questions. Just 44 cameras in Buck Island Ranch, and I used 40 for my study, 20 impact and 20 control.
Yeah, great talk. Do you have any predictions about how the change in the meso, what's the word, mesopredators sort of has a ripple effect across the whole food webs? Like, is a change in the habitat or population size? How does that sort of affect like their preys?
Yeah, that's a great question. So mesopredators exert a wide range of trophic influences across entire food webs. They provide essential services like controlling prey populations of mice and also dispersing native seeds. So because they're generalists, they kind of have their hands in a lot of pies. So they have definitely really important cascading impacts. Thankfully, these mesopredators are not at risk at all or threatened. Extirpation are very common. They're found in almost every landscape, human modified or not, across North America. So far so good, but with increasing human pressure, bobcats are seeing a slight decrease in Florida. So there's only so much that the larger mesopredators can endure, but that's a great question, and I hope studies like this can further delineate how these predators operate in these.
I'll probably ask one last question, but I just wanted to sort of celebrate the amount of work you do. And so can you walk us through the stats of how many images you had, how many you filtered out, or do you have any data on all the data cleaning you do? Because this looks really clean and beautiful, but you prioritize.
You lost my graphs. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
Excellent.
This Buck Island Ranch plan. For the last 2 years, we get a few images every now and then. And so we get immensity of data dumped onto us, and then we have to move through. We have help machine learning and AI programs that we actively train and update. We can remove the low confidence guesses, such as a false positive, and then we have slightly less. Then we can consolidate down to a sequence. So when an animal goes in front of a camera, it takes 10 pictures. However, that doesn't mean it's 10 detections. We want one detection. So then we reduce that down and we have a nice sizable data set. And then we can narrow this time frame down to our tagged photos. That means photos that we identify that we have an animal in it, and we have labeled what animal that is. It's a deer, it's a coyote, it's a bird, etc. And then we narrow the time frame down. So about in my 3-year study, we used about this many detections. And then from there, you filter down to your species and then further down. So, but this is a nice image of what it looks like. It's a lot of back end work. Humans on the back end sorting through a lot of ambiguous photos or animal butts, and going in the field every month as well. But it's all worth it to get this nice, clean data set, so then we can ask these really important ecological questions. So thank you for shouting out the amount of the work that goes into asking these questions.
Okay, I think good. Thanks again. Let's get that.